Dr. Sarah Chen wiped sweat from her face as she climbed over another pile of rocks. The sun in Kepler 442b burned hot and orange in the alien sky. She had been walking for 3 hours now, collecting rock samples for her survey mission. Her backpack felt heavy, but she ignored the ache in her shoulders. Sarah stopped when she heard a strange sound. It was like metal breaking, followed by a loud crash. She looked around the rocky hills and saw black smoke rising from behind a large boulder. Something had crashed there. Sarah knew she should call for help on her radio. But the sound was too far away for her base to hear clearly. The interference from the planet's magnetic field made communication hard. She decided to check what happened first. She climbed over the rocks toward the smoke. What she found made her freeze. A small spacecraft had crashed into the ground. The hull was cracked open like an egg. Strange blue liquid leaked from broken pipes. But that was not the most shocking thing. Near the wreckage sat a creature, unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. It looked almost human in shape, but its skin was clear like glass. She could see bones underneath that glowed with soft blue light. The creature was female, Sarah thought, though it was hard to be sure. She was about 6 feet tall and very thin. The alien was hurt. Her left leg bent at a wrong angle. Blue liquid that might be blood dripped from cuts on her arms. She held what looked like a weapon, pointing it at Sarah with shaking hands. "Stay back, human," the alien said. Her voice was musical, but full of pain. "I know what your kind does to prisoners." Sarah raised her hands to show she meant no harm. "I'm not military. I'm a scientist. You're hurt. Let me help you." The alien laughed, but it sounded bitter. "Help? Your species conquers worlds and calls it help." Sarah looked at her own injuries. During her rock climbing this morning, she had fallen and cut her arm on sharp stone. Blood had dried on the wound. Her knee was also scraped and sore. She sat down on a rock and opened her small first aid kit. The alien watched as Sarah cleaned her arm, cut with water from her bottle. The water was dirty from her long hike, but Sarah used it anyway. She then took out a needle and thread from her kit. "What are you doing?" the alien asked. She lowered her weapon slightly. "Cleaning my wound," Sarah said. She began to stitch the cut closed with the needle. The pain made her wince, but she kept working. "If I don't close this, it might get infected." The alien stared. Her glowing bones flickered brighter, which Sarah guessed meant surprise. "You are putting that dirty water on an open wound?" Sarah looked up while tying off the thread. "It's not ideal, but it's better than leaving dirt in the cut." She moved to her scraped knee and began cleaning that too. "Your species treats injuries like this?" the alien asked. "With no sterilization equipment? No healing chambers?" Sarah shrugged. "We make do with what we have." She stood up and packed her kit. "What about you? That leg looks bad." The alien looked down at her injured leg. "I need my ship's medical bay. But as you can see, my ship is destroyed." She gestured at the wreckage with her weapon. Sarah studied the damage. The small spacecraft was completely ruined. Whatever technology the alien needed was gone. "What's your name?" "Zixara of the Veltar Scouting Corps," the alien said. "And you?" "Sarah Chun. I'm a geologist with Earth Survey Division." Sarah took a step closer. "Zixara, that leg needs attention soon, or you could lose it." Zixara's grip on her weapon tightened. "Why do you care?" "Our peoples are enemies." Sarah thought about this. It was true that humans and Veltar had been fighting over territory in this sector. Ships from both sides had attacked each other. But looking at this hurt individual, Sarah could not think of her as an enemy. "Politics is for politicians," Sarah said. "Right now, you're just someone who needs help." Zixara studied Sarah's face for a long time. Her glowing bones pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. You speak truth. I can sense no deception in you. Sarah smiled. Good. Now let me look at that leg. You cannot fix what is broken in me, Zixara said. Veltar bones must heal in resonance chambers. Without the proper frequency waves, this fracture will spread through my entire skeletal system. I will die within days. Sarah knelt next to Zixara anyway. Maybe I can't fix it completely, but I might be able to stabilize it. Buy you some time. With what tools? Sarah looked around the crash site. She found some straight pieces of metal from the wreck. Her backpack had rope and tape. These will work. Zixara watched in amazement as Sarah began to fashion a splint. You would attempt surgery with such primitive equipment? It's not surgery, Sarah said, working with the metal pieces. It's first aid. Sometimes you have to work with what you have. As Sarah prepared to splint, she noticed Zixara was shivering. The alien's body temperature seemed to be dropping. Shock, maybe, or blood loss. We need to get you stable and move to shelter, Sarah said. There are caves about 2 miles from here. We can make camp there while we figure out how to get you to medical help. We? Zixara asked. Sarah looked at her seriously. I'm not leaving you here to die. Zixara's bones flickered again. Your kindness puzzles me. My intelligence report said humans were brutal and savage. Sarah finished preparing the splint materials. We can be both kind and savage. Depends on the situation. She looked up at the alien sky where the orange sun was getting lower. Right now, the situation calls for kindness. A low howl echoed across the rocky hills. Then another. And another. Both females froze. Zixara's eyes went wide with fear. Kethmorn pack hunters. The crash must have attracted them. Sarah felt her blood turn cold. She had read about those creatures in her mission briefing. 6-legged predators with thick armor and powerful jaws. They hunted in groups and could track prey for days. Another howl. Closer this time. Can you walk? Sarah asked, helping Zixara stand. Not well, but I can try. Sarah quickly splinted Zixara's leg with the metal pieces and rope. It was rough work, but it would have to do. She shouldered both their packs and helped the alien stand. Which way are these caves? Zixara asked. Sarah pointed toward a distant ridge. That way. But it's going to be a hard climb with your injury. The howls were getting closer. Sarah could hear rocks falling as large creatures moved through the hills. Then we better start moving, Zixara said. Sarah nodded. She wrapped Zixara's arm around her shoulder and began helping her walk. Behind them, the howls grew louder and more excited. Their hunt had begun. Sarah and Zixara had been moving for 2 hours when they heard the first real sign of danger. Heavy footsteps on rocks, getting closer. Sarah helped Zixara sit behind a large boulder while she climbed up to look. What she saw made her stomach drop. 3 Kethmorn creatures moved through the hills below them. They were bigger than she had imagined. Each one was the size of a small car, with 6 thick legs and dark gray armor covering their bodies. Their heads were long and filled with sharp teeth. They moved like giant lizards, but much faster. Sarah climbed back down to Zixara. 3 of them. Maybe half a mile away. They're following our trail. Zixara's glowing bones pulsed faster. Kethmorn never give up once they pick up a scent. They will hunt us until we are dead, or they are. Sarah looked at the injured alien. Zixara was trying to be brave, but Sarah could see the fear in her eyes. The makeshift splint was holding, but walking was still painful for her. How far to the caves? Zixara asked. Sarah checked her map device. 6 miles. Maybe 7 with all these hills. She looked at Zixara's leg. That's a lot of walking on that injury. I can make it, Zixara said. But her voice was weak. Sarah shook her head. Not at the speed we need to go. Those things are gaining on us. Another howl echoed through the rocks. This one was much closer. Sarah grabbed both packs and pulled Zixara to her feet. "New plan," Sarah said. "We run when we can, hide when we must, and fight if we have to." They started moving again. Sarah took most of Zixara's weight on her shoulder. The alien was lighter than she looked, but the packs were heavy and the ground was rough. Sarah's muscles began to ache after the first mile. "You should leave me," Zixara said during a rest stop. "You could reach safety alone." Sarah wiped sweat from her face. "Not happening? Why?" "Your people and mine are enemies." Sarah helped Zixara stand again. "Maybe our governments are enemies, but you and I aren't." She started walking. "Besides, I don't leave people behind." Zixara was quiet for several minutes as they climbed over rocks. Finally, she spoke. "In my culture, such loyalty must be earned over years of shared service." "In my culture, it just needs to be the right thing to do," Sarah replied. They heard the Kethmoran again. The creatures were definitely closer now. Sarah could hear them knocking rocks around as they searched for the trail. She and Zixara had been trying to walk on hard stone to hide their footprints, but it was impossible to leave no trace. "They are persistent," Zixara said. "So are we," Sarah replied. The chase continued through the afternoon. Sarah kept them moving at a steady pace, stopping only when Zixara absolutely needed rest. During one break, she found a small stream and made Zixara drink water. The alien was getting weaker, and dehydration would make everything worse. "Your endurance is remarkable," Zixara said while drinking. "Most Veltar would have collapsed hours ago." Sarah drank some water herself. "Humans are built for long-distance travel. We used to hunt by chasing prey until it got too tired to run." "You hunted by running?" Zixara sounded amazed. "For thousands of years," Sarah said. She helped Zixara back to her feet. "We're not the fastest or strongest, but we don't give up easily." As the sun began to set, the orange light made the rocks harder to see clearly. Sarah had to be more careful about where they stepped. A fall now could break bones or twist ankles, but the fading light also gave them a chance. Sarah led them into a narrow canyon between two tall rock walls. The passage was only wide enough for one person at a time. "This will slow them down," Sarah explained. "Those creatures are too big to move fast through here." They squeezed through the narrow space for almost an hour. Sarah's shoulders scraped against the rock walls, and she had to push the packs ahead of her in some places. But Zixara was right behind her, moving as well as she could, with her injured leg taut. When they came out the other side, Sarah climbed a small hill to look back. She could see lights in the canyon where the Kethmoran were trying to follow them. But the creatures were having trouble. Their wide bodies barely fit through the narrow space. "That bought us some time," Sarah said when she climbed back down. Zixara was sitting on a rock, breathing hard. "How much further to the caves?" Sarah checked her map. 3 miles. "Maybe 4. "I do not know if I can walk that far," Zixara admitted. Sarah looked at the alien's leg. The splint was still holding, but Zixara was clearly in pain. Her glowing bones were dim now, which Sarah was learning meant exhaustion or weakness. "Yes, you can," Sarah said firmly. "You're stronger than you think. How do you know?" Sarah shouldered the packs again and helped Zixara stand. "Because you've already walked further than you thought you could. You just need to do it a little more." They kept moving through the night. Sarah used her flashlight to see the path, but kept it pointed down to avoid giving away their position. The Kethmoran had gotten through the canyon and were hunting again. She could hear them in the distance. Zixara stumbled several times during the dark hours. Each time, Sarah caught her and helped her keep going. The alien never complained, even though Sarah could see the pain in her face. "Tell me about your world," Sarah said while they walked. She wanted to keep Zixara's mind off the pain. Velta Prime is beautiful, Zixara said. Cities of crystal that sing in the wind. Gardens where the plants glow like stars. The healing chambers where broken bones mend in minutes. Sounds amazing, Sarah said. Very different from Earth. What is your world like? Sarah thought for a moment. Messy, loud, full of people who disagree about everything. But we make it work somehow. And you have no healing chambers? We have hospitals, Sarah said. But most healing happens slowly, over time. We've learned to be patient with it. As the night wore on, Sarah began to worry. Zixara was getting weaker, and the Kethmorn were getting closer. Every hour or so, she could see their lights searching through the rocks behind them. Just before dawn, they reached the bottom of a steep hill. At the top, Sarah could see the dark openings of caves. They had made it. Almost there, Sarah told Zixara, but as they started climbing, disaster struck. The rocks here were loose and weathered. Zixara's injured leg gave out on a steep section, and she started to fall backwards down the hill. Sarah lunged forward and caught her, but the sudden movement made them both lose balance. They tumbled together down the rocky slope, packs flying in different directions. When they stopped rolling, Sarah's head was spinning and her body ached all over. But she was more worried about Zixara. The alien lay next to her, not moving. Zixara! Sarah crawled over to her. The alien's eyes opened slowly. I think my arm is broken now too. Sarah looked and saw that Zixara's left arm was bent wrong, just like her leg had been. The glowing bones under her clear skin showed bright cracks where the break had happened. Behind them, down in the valley, Sarah heard the hunting calls of the Kethmorn. They had found the trail again. Can you move? Sarah asked. I will try, Zixara said. Sarah helped her sit up, then gathered their scattered packs. They had lost some supplies in the fall, but the important things were still there. She looked up at the caves. They were so close, but with Zixara's new injury, climbing would be almost impossible. The Kethmorn calls were getting louder. Leave me, Zixara said again. You cannot carry me up that hill. Sarah looked at the injured alien, then at the approaching danger, then at the steep climb to safety. Anyone reasonable would agree that staying together meant they would both die. You're right, Sarah said. I probably can't carry you up that hill. Zixara closed her eyes, accepting her fate. But I'm going to try anyway, Sarah added. She put Zixara's good arm around her neck and began to climb. Sarah dragged Zixara up the rocky hill step by painful step. The alien tried to help by pushing with her good leg, but she was getting weaker. Sarah's muscles screamed with effort, and sweat poured down her face despite the cool morning air. Behind them, the Kethmorn were climbing too. Sarah could hear their claws scraping on stone as they came up the slope. The creatures were much better climbers than she had hoped. There, Sarah gasped, pointing to a cave opening about 50 feet above them. Almost there. But as they climbed higher, the rock became more unstable. Pieces broke off under their feet and tumbled down toward the hunting creatures below. Sarah had to test each handhold carefully. Sarah, Zixara whispered. I cannot feel my arm anymore. Sarah glanced at the alien's broken limb. The bright blue glow under her skin was flickering weakly. Whatever passed for blood in her species was not flowing properly to the injured area. Just a little further, Sarah said. They reached a ledge about 20 feet from the cave mouth. Sarah thought they could rest there for a moment, but the ledge was narrower than it looked. As she tried to get a better grip, her foot slipped on loose gravel. For a terrifying moment, they both hung over empty air. Sarah's hands caught a small rock outcrop, but she could not hold both their weights for long. Let me go, Zixara said. Save yourself. No, Sarah grunted, pulling them both back onto the ledge. But the effort cost them. Sarah's strength was nearly gone, and Zixara was unconscious now from pain and exhaustion. Worse, The Cathmoran had reached the bottom of the cliff and were starting to climb. Sarah looked up at the cave entrance. It might as well have been on the moon. She looked down at the approaching predators. Their yellow eyes glowed in the dim light, and she could see saliva dripping from their jaws. Then she had an idea. Sarah gathered rocks from the ledge and began throwing them down at the creatures. Her aim was good from years of geological fieldwork. The first rock hit the lead Cathmoran right in the head, causing it to lose its grip and fall back down. The other two kept climbing, but they were more careful now. Sarah kept throwing rocks, trying to make them take cover or fall. She was buying time, but for what? She and Zixar were trapped. "Wake up," Sarah said, shaking the alien gently. "I need you conscious for this." Zixar's eyes opened slowly. "What? Where are we?" "Still on the cliff. Still being hunted. But I think I can get us into that cave if you can help me." Sarah pointed to a series of handholds that led across the cliff face to the cave entrance. It was not a straight climb up, but a sideways traverse along the rock wall. "I cannot climb with this arm," Zixar said. "You don't have to climb. Just hold on to me." Sarah tied rope around both their waists, connecting them together. Then she began the traverse, with Zixar clinging to her back with her good arm. The crossing was the hardest thing Sarah had ever done. Each handhold had to support both their weights. Her fingers were raw and bleeding by the time they were halfway across. Below them, the Cathmoran had figured out their path and were following. "Almost there," Sarah whispered. But as they neared the cave entrance, disaster struck again. The rope connecting them caught on a sharp piece of rock and jerked tight. The sudden pull made Sarah lose her grip. They fell, but instead of falling all the way down the cliff, they crashed onto another ledge about 10 feet below the cave. Sarah hit the rock hard and felt something crack in her ribs. Zixar screamed as her broken arm twisted under her body. When Sarah's vision cleared, she saw that they were on a small shelf of rock barely wide enough for both of them. Above them was the cave entrance, impossibly far away. Below them were the Cathmoran, now only minutes from reaching their position. But the worst thing was Zixar's arm. The fall had made the break much worse. Sarah could see through the alien's translucent skin that the bone was not just broken now. It was shattered into several pieces. The bright blue glow that ran through Veltar bones was fading to a dull gray. "The resonance cascade has started," Zixar whispered. "When one bone fails completely, the vibration spreads to all the others. I will be dead in an hour." Sarah examined the arm more closely. She was no doctor, but she had taken basic medical training for her field work. She knew what a bad break looked like, and this was very bad. "The bone pieces need to be realigned," Sarah said. "If I can get them back in the right position, maybe your natural healing can take over." Zixar stared at her. "You mean to set the bone? Here? With no tools?" "I don't see another choice." "Sarah, you do not understand. Veltar bone structure is different from human. You could make it worse. You could kill me." Sarah looked down at the approaching predators, then back at Zixar's dying arm. "You're going to die anyway if I don't try." She opened her pack and pulled out her small first aid kit. Inside were bandages, antiseptic, and some basic painkillers. Not much to work with. "This is going to hurt," Sarah warned. "I know," Zixar said. Sarah cleaned her hands with antiseptic, then began to feel along the broken arm. Through Zixar's clear skin, she could see exactly where each bone fragment was out of place. It was like looking at an X-ray in real time. "The main shaft is broken in 3 places," Sarah said, more to herself than to Zixar. 2 fragments are overlapping. The third is turned sideways. She gave Zixar one of her painkiller pills. "This might help a little." "Sarah, you cannot do this with your bare hands." "It is impossible." "Maybe," Sarah said. but I'm going to try. She placed her hands on either side of the break. Zixara's skin was warm and felt strange. Not quite like human skin, but close enough. Sarah took a deep breath and began to apply pressure. The first bone fragment moved back into place with a grinding sound that made them both wince. Zixara gritted her teeth but did not cry out. "One down," Sarah said. The second fragment was harder. It was wedged behind the first one and would not move easily. Sarah had to twist Zixara's arm slightly to get the angle right. This time, the alien did scream. "I'm sorry," Sarah said. "I know it hurts." "Keep going," Zixara gasped. The third fragment was the worst. It was turned completely backwards and would not respond to gentle pressure. Sarah knew she would have to use force. "This is going to be bad," she warned. Sarah gripped the arm firmly and began to rotate the bone fragment back into position. Zixara's scream echoed off the cliff walls. Her good hand clawed at Sarah's arms, leaving deep scratches, but the bone moved. Slowly, painfully, it turned back to where it belonged. "You beast!" Zixara cried out, tears running down her face. "You impossible, beautiful beast." Sarah held the bones in place with steady hands while she wrapped them tightly with bandages from her kit. She had to maintain pressure to keep the fragments aligned while the binding took hold. "I know," Sarah said softly. "I know it hurts. But look," Zixara looked down at her arm. The blue glow was starting to return. Faint at first, but growing brighter. The bone fragments were in the right position, and her natural healing was beginning to work. "How did you know?" Zixara asked through her tears. "I didn't," Sarah admitted. "I just did what seemed right." Below them, the first Kethmoran reached the ledge. Sarah looked down at the creature's glowing eyes, then up at the cave entrance above them. "Can you climb now?" Sarah asked. Zixara tested her arm gently. It was still painful, but the bone was stable. "I think so." Sarah helped her stand. "Then let's get out of here." They climbed the final 20 feet to the cave entrance, with the Kethmorans snapping at their heels. But the creatures were too large to follow them into the narrow cave opening. Inside the cave, they collapsed on the stone floor. Exhausted and battered, but alive. "You saved my life," Zixara said. Sarah was bandaging her own scratches from the bone setting. "You would have done the same for me." "No," Zixara said quietly. "I would not have. My people would never attempt such a thing without proper equipment. We would have accepted death rather than risk making it worse." Sarah looked at her in surprise. "Then how do you handle emergencies?" "We try to avoid them," Zixara admitted. "We prepare for every possibility. We bring backup equipment. We have detailed protocols. What if the protocols fail?" Zixara was quiet for a long moment. "Then we die with dignity." Sarah shook her head. "That's a terrible plan." Outside the cave, they could hear the frustrated roars of the Kethmoran as the creatures gave up trying to reach them. The hunt was over, for now. Zixara examined her bandaged arm. The blue glow was steady now, and she could move her fingers without too much pain. "I do not understand your species," she said. "You take terrible risks. You attempt impossible things. You hurt others to help them." Sarah leaned back against the cave wall. "Sometimes you have to break something to fix it." "That makes no sense." "Sure it does," Sarah said. "Sometimes the safe choice is the wrong choice. Sometimes you have to do something scary because it's the only way." Zixara looked at her with new eyes. "You are not what I expected from a human. What did you expect?" "A savage. A brute. Someone who destroys rather than heals." Sarah smiled tiredly. "Give me time. I might surprise you again." They stayed in the cave for 6 hours while Zixara's arm healed. Sarah used the time to treat her own injuries and check their supplies. They had lost some food in the fall, but enough remained for another day or two. Zixara watched Sarah work with growing fascination. The human cleaned every cut and scrape, no matter how small. She stitched up a tear in her jacket where Kethmorn claws had caught it. She even repaired a broken strap on her backpack with careful needlework. "You maintain everything," Zixara observed. Sarah looked up from sharpening her knife on a piece of stone. "It's easier to fix small problems before they become big ones. But such detailed attention to minor damage. It seems inefficient, is it?" Sarah tested the knife edge with her thumb. "This knife will cut better now. My jacket will keep me warmer. My pack won't break when I need it most." She put the knife away. "How is that inefficient?" Zixara thought about this. In Veltar society, damaged items were simply replaced with new ones. The idea of repairing something over and over seemed primitive. "What happens when your people get sick?" she asked. "We treat the illness," Sarah said. "With medicine, surgery, therapy. Whatever works. But what if the treatment is painful?" Sarah unwrapped Zixara's aeon to check the healing. The blue glow was much brighter now, and the bone fragments seemed to be fusing together. Most effective treatments involve some discomfort. That seems cruel. Is it cruel to hurt someone temporarily to save their life permanently? Zixara did not have a good answer for that. In her culture, pain was always avoided if possible. Medical procedures were designed to be comfortable and pleasant. The idea of deliberately causing pain, even for good reasons, felt wrong to her. "Tell me about human medicine," she said. Sarah rewrapped the arm with fresh bandages. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. How did your species learn to heal without technology?" Sarah leaned back against the cave wall. "We had to learn. Humans get hurt a lot, and for most of our history, we didn't have advanced technology to fix it." She told Zixara about battlefield surgeons who operated by candlelight, about frontier doctors who traveled hundreds of miles to help sick families, about the first humans who figured out that cleaning wounds prevented infection, long before anyone knew about germs. They had to make choices, Sarah explained. Let someone die from infection, or cut off the infected limb to save their life. Let someone suffer with a broken bone that healed wrong, or break it again and set it properly. Those are terrible choices, Zixara said. Yes, but choosing to do nothing is also a choice. And often, it's the worst choice of all. Zixara was quiet for a long time. Through her transparent skin, Sarah could see the alien's bones pulsing with thought. Finally, she spoke. In my culture, we would rather die than endure unnecessary pain. What about necessary pain? We try to eliminate that too. Sarah checked her watch. They had been in the cave long enough. The Kethmorn had given up and moved on, and they needed to continue toward the evacuation point. Can you walk? Sarah asked. Zixara tested her arm carefully. It was still tender, but the bone was solid now. Yes, the healing is progressing well. They packed up and left the cave. Outside, the alien sun was high and hot again. Sarah consulted her map and compass, then led them down a different path than they had taken to reach the cliffside as they walked. Zixara asked more questions about human medicine. Sarah told her about vaccines that prevented disease by deliberately exposing people to small amounts of it, about chemotherapy that poisoned cancer cells while making the patient sick, about physical therapy that forced injured people to use damaged muscles until they grew strong again. Your species has a strained relationship with suffering, Zixara said. We don't enjoy it, Sarah replied. But we don't let it stop us either. They came to a river that blocked their path. The water was fast-moving and looked deep. Sarah could see the remains of a bridge that had been washed away by recent floods. We'll have to cross upstream where it's shallower, Sarah said. They walked along the riverbank for an hour, before finding a place where the water was only waist deep. But the current was still strong, and the rocks on the bottom were slippery. "This looks dangerous," Zixara said. "It is dangerous," Sarah agreed. "But it's less dangerous than going around, which would add 2 days to our journey." She tested the water with her foot. "We don't have enough food for 2 extra days." Sarah waded into the river first, using a long stick to check the depth and test her footing. The current pushed against her legs, trying to knock her over. Halfway across, she turned and called to Zixara. "Your turn. Take it slow and follow exactly where I stepped." Zixara hesitated at the water's edge. "What if I fall?" "Then you get wet," Sarah said. "What if you don't try?" "I stay safe on this side and starve in 3 days when our food runs out." Zixara looked at the rushing water, then at Sarah standing confidently in the middle of the river. The human was soaked up to her chest, but she looked calm and ready to help if needed. "This is another terrible choice," Zixara said. "Most good choices look terrible at first," Sarah replied. Zixara took a deep breath and stepped into the water. The current was stronger than she expected, and she almost lost her balance immediately. But Sarah was there instantly, grabbing her good arm and helping her stay upright. "I've got you," Sarah said. "One step at a time." They crossed the river together, with Sarah checking each step and Zixara learning to trust the human's judgment. When they reached the other side, both were wet and cold. But they were safe. "That was terrifying," Zixara said as she wrung water from her clothes. "But we made it," Sarah pointed out. "What if we had fallen?" Sarah shrugged. "Then we would have gotten very wet and been washed downstream. Then we would have climbed out and tried again." "You make it sound simple." "It is simple. Not easy, but simple." Sarah checked their location on her map. 2 more miles to the evacuation point. As they walked, Zixara thought about everything she had learned. Sarah's approach to problems was completely different from what she was used to. Where Veltar would plan and prepare and avoid risk, humans seemed to accept risk as part of life. "Sarah," she said, "why do your people fight so often?" "What do you mean?" "The wars between our species. The conflicts on your own world. If humans can be as caring as you are, why is there so much violence?" Sarah was quiet for several minutes as they climbed over rocks and around trees. Finally, she answered, "Same reason we're good at medicine, I think. We care deeply about the people close to us. Sometimes that means fighting to protect them. But fighting causes suffering. So does letting bad things happen to people you care about." Zixara tried to understand this. "So you hurt some people to protect others?" "Sometimes. It's not a perfect system, but nothing is." They reached the top of a hill and could see the evacuation point in the distance. It was a flat area where ships could land, with a small emergency shelter. Sarah's relief was obvious. "Almost there," she said. But as they started down the hill, Zixara stopped walking. "Sarah, I need to ask you something." "What is it?" "When you set my bone yesterday, how did you know it would work?" Sarah thought about the question. "I didn't know. I hoped it would work. But you could have made it worse. You could have killed me." "Yes. So why did you try?" Sarah looked at her seriously. "Because doing nothing would definitely have killed you. At least this way, you had a chance." "That is not how my people think. I know. We would consider it wrong to take such a risk with someone else's life." Sarah nodded. "I understand that. But I would consider it wrong not to take that risk." They stared at each other for a moment. 2 completely different ways of thinking about the same problem. "I think," Zixara said slowly, "that your way requires more courage. Maybe. Or maybe your way requires more wisdom. I don't know." They walked the rest of the way to the evacuation point in comfortable silence. When they reached the shelter, Sarah activated her emergency beacon to call for pickup. They would be rescued within hours. As they waited, Zixara examined her arm one more time. The bone had healed completely, though it would probably always be slightly different from before. There was a thin line where the breaks had been, like a scar inside her skeleton. "I will carry the mark of this for the rest of my life," she said. "Scars tell stories," Sarah replied. "Good ones and bad ones. What story does this one tell?" Sarah smiled. "It tells the story of the day a human and a Veltar learned to trust each other. In the distance, they could hear the sound of approaching rescue ships. Their time together was almost over. What will you tell your people about me?" Sarah asked. Zixara looked at her arm, then at Sarah, then at the empty backpack that had carried them both through 2 days of hell. "I will tell them," she said, "that humans are far more dangerous than we thought." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Dangerous?" "Yes, because you make us want to be braver than we are." 3 months later, Zixara stood before the Veltar High Council on their home world. The chamber was a beautiful crystal dome that sang with harmonic frequencies, designed to promote calm and careful thinking. Around her sat the 12 council members, their translucent forms glowing softly in the resonant light. Her arm had healed completely, though she still carried the thin scar lines where the bones had been broken. To other Veltar, those marks were a reminder of primitive medical treatment. To Zixara, they were a reminder of courage. "Council members," she began, "I come before you with a revised assessment of the human threat level." The council leader, an ancient Veltar named Kixtel, gestured for her to continue. "Proceed, Scout Zixara. Your original reports suggested humans were technologically inferior, but numerically dangerous. Has this assessment changed?" Zixara activated a holographic display showing her mission data. "Council members, I must report that our understanding of human capabilities has been fundamentally incomplete." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Council member Rixvin leaned forward. "Explain." "We have been measuring human strength by their technology," Zixara said. "This is like measuring the ocean by counting its ships. We completely missed the ocean itself." She began her presentation with video recordings from her mission. The council watched in silence as she showed them footage of Sarah climbing cliffs, crossing rivers, and walking for hours while carrying heavy equipment. "Observe the human's physical endurance," Zixara pointed out. "She maintains this pace for 18 hours straight with minimal rest. No Veltar could match this performance, even with enhancement technology." Council member Tixara spoke up. "Physical stamina is not a significant military advantage in modern warfare." "That is what I thought too," Zixara replied. "But I was wrong." She showed them footage of Sarah performing field medicine. The council members watched in stunned silence as the human cleaned wounds with dirty water, stitched cuts with primitive tools, and fashioned splints from wreckage. "This is barbaric," council member Zixoda said with disgust. "How can they function with such crude medical practices?" "That is exactly the wrong question," Zixara said firmly. "The right question is, how do they function so well with such limited resources?" She paused the video on an image of Sarah sharpening her knife. "Humans do not need perfect conditions to operate effectively. They adapt to whatever conditions exist. They improvise solutions when their equipment fails. They accept risks that we would consider unacceptable." The council leader shifted in his seat. "You speak of their adaptability as if it were an advantage. Surely our advanced preparation is superior to their crude improvisation." Zixara touched the scar on her arm. "Council leader, may I share a personal experience?" "Proceed." "When my arm was broken beyond the reach of our medical technology, I accepted death as inevitable. The human did not. She attempted a procedure she had never performed on an alien anatomy she barely understood, with tools that barely qualified as tools at all, and nearly killed you in the process." Council Member Rixvan pointed out. Yes, Zixara agreed. She could have made my condition worse. She could have crippled me permanently. She could have caused my death through her ignorance. She flexed her healed arm. Instead, she saved my life. Through luck, not skill. No, Zixara said. Through willingness to act despite uncertainty. Through accepting responsibility for outcomes she could not predict. Through choosing possible failure over certain doom. She changed the holographic display to show strategic assessments. Council members, we have been preparing for war with humans by matching our technology against theirs. This is like preparing for a storm by counting the raindrops. Elaborate, the council leader commanded. Zixara pulled up comparison charts. Human technology is indeed inferior to ours in direct comparison. Their ships are slower. Their weapons are less precise. Their medical equipment is primitive. She paused. None of this matters. Explain. Human ships may be slower, but they operate in conditions that would disable our vessels. Their weapons may be less precise, but they function reliably in environments where our advanced systems fail. Their medical equipment may be primitive, but their medics can treat injuries that our technology cannot reach. Council Member Zixara spoke up. You are suggesting that inferior technology can be superior to advanced technology? I am suggesting that technology which works in difficult conditions is superior to technology which only works in perfect conditions. Zixara activated another display showing human military history. Observe their pattern of warfare. Humans routinely win battles against technologically superior opponents. They compensate for equipment disadvantages with tactical creativity, physical endurance, and psychological resilience. This is speculation, Council Member Zixara said. No, it is documented fact. Zixara highlighted specific examples. Humans with primitive weapons defeating forces with advanced technology. Human soldiers continuing to fight after injuries that would incapacitate our warriors. Human commanders making strategic decisions with incomplete information and succeeding. The council leader was quiet for a long moment. What do you recommend? Zixara took a breath. I recommend that we avoid military conflict with humanity entirely. Shocked murmurs filled the chamber. Council Member Rixvan stood up. You recommend surrender? I recommend survival, Zixara replied calmly. Council members, we have been thinking of humans as inferior opponents. This is dangerously incorrect. They are different opponents. And in many ways, they are superior opponents. How so? We plan for success and prepare for failure. Humans plan for failure and prepare for the unexpected. We avoid risks that might cause suffering. Humans accept suffering as the price of achievement. We perfect our technology to eliminate uncertainty. Humans perfect themselves to thrive in uncertainty. Zixara gestured to her scarred arm. One human with no tools accomplished what our most advanced medical technology could not. She fixed something that was completely broken in hostile conditions, with no guarantee of success. A single anecdote does not constitute strategic intelligence, Council Member Zixara pointed out. It is not a single anecdote. It is a representative example of human problem-solving philosophy. Zixara brought up her final display. Observe human responses to natural disasters, equipment failures, and impossible situations. The pattern is consistent. They attempt solutions that rational analysis would reject as too risky. And this makes them dangerous? This makes them unpredictable. And against an unpredictable opponent who refuses to accept defeat, technological advantages become irrelevant. The council leader stood up. Scout Zixara, you are recommending that the Voltar Confederacy avoid conflict with the species you describe as primitive and reckless. I am recommending that we avoid conflict with a species that considers primitive and reckless to be tactical. Advantages. She paused, letting that sink in. Council members, humans do not fight wars the way we do. They do not seek efficient victories or minimal casualties. They seek victory regardless of efficiency or casualties. They are willing to suffer terrible losses to achieve their goals. They are willing to sacrifice themselves for their comrades. They are willing to attempt impossible solutions to unsolvable problems. This sounds like insanity, Councilmember HFY said. Perhaps. But it is effective insanity. And effective insanity is indistinguishable from tactical genius. The council leader sat back down. What do you propose instead of conflict? Trade, alliance, cooperation. HFY brought up economic projections. Humans have resources we need and face challenges where our technology could help them. They have adaptability we lack and face problems where our careful planning could guide them. You suggest we work with these dangerous primitives? I suggest we work with these dangerous innovators before they decide we are a problem that needs solving. The chamber was quiet for several minutes as the council considered her words. Finally, the council leader spoke. Scout HFY, your report is unusual. Most concerning is your suggestion that human unpredictability is an advantage rather than a weakness. Council leader, unpredictability is only a weakness if you are trying to predict it. It becomes an advantage when you are trying to solve problems that predictable methods cannot solve. Another long pause. We will consider your recommendations, the council leader said. You are dismissed. As HFY left the chamber, she touched the scar on her arm again. Tomorrow, a human trade delegation was scheduled to arrive at Veltar Prime. She had recommended that she serve as liaison for their visit. She suspected that after meeting real humans, the council would understand her report much better. 2 days later, Dr. Sarah Chun stepped off the transport ship onto the crystal platform of Veltar Prime. She carried a simple backpack and wore the same practical clothes she had worn on their first meeting. When HFY greeted her at the spaceport, Sarah smiled and pointed at the alien's healed arm. How's the patient doing? HFY flexed her arm, showing the faint scar lines that ran through her translucent skin. Completely functional. The mark of your primitive medicine will be with me forever.